Hello and welcome back to Life on the Wrist. Hope you're doing well. Today we're going to be taking a look at this late 90s Omega Speedmaster Michael Schumacher racing, which is a really interesting piece in the history of the Omega Speedmaster. The Omega Speedmaster does not need much of an introduction. It was first introduced in 1957 as a racing watch, but gained much of its lore from its importance to space exploration, specifically U.S. space exploration. In the summer of 1996, Omega released a special Speedmaster that harkened back to its roots of being on the wrists of drivers. So to take you back to sort of the racing history of that time period, I think it's important to think back to what the 90s were like. So in the 90s, Michael Schumacher was an athlete that was on top of everyone's mind. For those of you who do not know Michael Schumacher, he is a German former racing driver who began his career in Formula One in 1991. He made his F1 debut with Jordan Ford team at the Belgian Grand Prix, where he qualified 7th and really did impress Formula One enthusiasts as well as other teams, but he had to retire during that race for mechanical issues. He continued to have success in his career and won his first F1 championship in 1994 while driving for Benetton. He later went on to win 7 championships throughout his career, and for a long time was the record holder of the most F1 championships to have been won by one racer. 1996 was a really busy year for Schumacher as he had joined the infamous brand of Ferrari. Their F1 team obviously had not had some success up until the 90s, and I think the last time they had won was in the 70s and 80s. But at the same time, he also became a brand ambassador for Omega, which is really the reason why we're covering him in this video. This partnership made complete sense given the history of Omega and their importance to the world of racing. And to launch the new ambassadorship, Omega launched the Omega Speedmaster Racing, which is a model that is notable for its younger aesthetics, and that's what you see in front of you today. It was first released on July 22nd, 1996 at Schumacher's go-kart track in Kerpen in Germany. The watch was launched in 2 versions, one with a red dial and then one with a yellow dial, which is the one that you see in front of you here. And what was really cool about these pieces is they were released in these very interesting boxes that it was a rubber presentation box that basically had 2 tires on the sides of them, and they looked like F1 tires. So the version that you see in front of you today is one of those examples from the launch in 1996. And this one is the yellow dial version, which at a first glance can kind of lead to mixed feelings. I'll be honest, when I saw pictures of this watch online, it felt like the lesser of the two. I think the red was a little bit deeper, a little bit more of a mellow color, and the yellow always felt a little bit, I hate to say it, but harsh and quite vivid in nature. But once you actually have it in person, you're able to see it in different lights and on your wrist. It really is an impressively looking piece that was designed really well by Omega. So this version of this watch dates to between 1996 and 1999, the years of production. Those were the years of production for these pieces. It's a really common misconception that these watches were made in a limited edition or a special edition, which they weren't. They were actually in, I think, regular production. But they were only made for about 3 years, so you are looking at something that wasn't produced for as much time as maybe some other pieces in Omega's lineup. The watch is 39 millimeters in diameter, and as you can see, has a really nice sort of brushed finish along the on the sides of the case, and then you see a really nice polished finish on sort of the top edges of the case. The watch features a black tachymeter bezel, which you see on the outside of this watch, and is in pretty good condition. The only thing I notice is just a little bit of a nick there on the bezel, but otherwise is in really great condition. Typical of Speedmasters, you have these really awesome twisted lugs, which you can see are on this model as well. And it has a stainless steel case back, which you can see here with the Speedmaster Hippocampus Seahorse logo. The crown is also signed by Omega, as you can see there. And I think what really makes this watch really special is the dial. So you can see it has this really striking yellow color on the center of the dial with a racing minutes track around the outside of the dial, and then these hour batons that are on the inside of that racing track. The luminescent material there's luminescent material applied to the hour markers, as well as the hands, where you can see the white luminescent material that is applied, and it shines really, really bright in even today, you know, let's say 20, at least 25 years since it was since the end of the production of these models. The layout of the subdials provides a 60-second counter at 3 o'clock. It also has a 12-hour counter at 6 o'clock and a 30-minute counter at 9 o'clock, all of which are slightly depressed into the dial, which I think if you look at it kind of on the side here, what you'll see is the depressed nature of the dial there, which I think is quite attractive, and in my mind gives the watch a little bit of depth, which I think is important with these types of watches. The watch runs on the caliber 1143 movement from Omega, which is based on the ETA 2892 chronograph movement. The chronograph is fairly pleasant to use. It's very buttery to start, stop, and reset it. Very typical of these automatic calibers. I'll do that for you right now. So I'll start the chronograph for you here. So super buttery, really nice action on the red chronograph hand, as you can see, moving away. Very simple to stop and then reset. It'll snap back to 12 o'clock. As I mentioned in the previous video that we made about a week ago, one of the things that I want to try and do is a lot of the times I have a lot of positive things to say about the watches, mainly because I just like them so much, but I do want to incorporate in 2025 some sort of criticality to these watch reviews, and it can be really difficult to find something to criticize about an Omega Speedmaster. The watches are designed extremely well and are very wearable, and it's quite difficult to really go at anything with this, with this very iconic design. Some may look at the yellow dial and find it as an adverse feature of the watch, but as mentioned before, I really think the yellow dial is so much better in person when you do see it. I think it doesn't photograph well, but it really is quite attractive in person. To me, the color is not as harsh as it comes across in pictures, and it's really nice to actually see on the wrist. If there was something to criticize about the watch, it would likely be the movement that it's running on. For die-hard Speedmaster enthusiasts, an Omega manual wind movement is the only thing that should really be fitted into a Speedmaster. The caliber 1143 is a nice overall looking movement and works really, really well, but it kind of deviates from what was originally launched in the Omega Speedmaster in 1957, which was the famous column wheel caliber 321 movement. Probably don't want to be considered sort of a movement snob. There are some automatic calibers that have been in Omega Speedmasters throughout the history of the brand. But, if you are looking to criticize something, I think in such an iconic watch as the Speedmaster, a lot of the times people want something that is manufactured by Omega, or at least as close to the caliber 321 as possible. At 39 millimeters, the watch is incredibly wearable for most people. It isn't overly large, which is quite common during the late 90s and early 2000s of watches that were quite in during that time, but it's not small where it kind of can restrict possible wears. I'll put it on my wrist in 1 second. But I think the racing minutes track around the outside of the dial is a nice nod to the icon and an incredible driver that was Michael Schumacher. One feature that I think is very attractive, and I mentioned it already, is the subdials that are slightly depressed into the dial. I think it's something that you only notice if you're kind of up close to the dial, or at least you're seeing some fairly macro shots of it. But I think the depth that it gives to the Speedmaster is really important, and I think it's those small things that kind of excite people about collecting Speedmasters or collecting watches just in general. So as I mentioned, the watch is 39 millimeters in diameter. This is what it's going to look like on my wrist once I get it to focus. This is what it looks like on my wrist. I wear watches that are 25, 26 millimeters in diameter, so 39 millimeters fits really, really well on my wrist if you're considering sort of a small wrist. Fits quite nice. It's not overly thick, which is really what the Omega Speedmaster often is. It's just such a well-designed, well-built watch, and I think looks really great on the wrist. For me, the Racing Speedmaster was an important step in Schumacher's career, but also an important step in the history of Omega Speedmasters. One does not find colorful dials in the historical lineup of Speedmasters very often, which makes these watches quite collectible and kind of off the beaten path of what the typical Omega Speedmaster is. And they're also this watch is extremely wearable, as the other Schumacher version is, and it's got a really exciting bit of history, and I think that's what makes this watch so fun and so exciting to wear. I hope you enjoyed taking a look at this really cool Omega Speedmaster. These pieces are really interesting. You don't really see a lot of colorful dials, as I mentioned in the video. You don't really see a lot of colored dials in the Omega Speedmaster lineup. Obviously, there are other versions. You've got the red version of this Omega Speedmaster Racing. There's also a Michael Schumacher with a blue dial. And then I think there's also a couple other pieces with interesting dial colors. But this one really does stand out, being that it's yellow. There's another Speedmaster, I think Speedmaster Automatic with a yellow dial, but the yellow in this watch really does stand out. And as I mentioned throughout the video, when I saw pictures of this, I never really was interested in it, but then I got it in person and I was able to actually see what the yellow dial looks like, and it is so much different in person than it is when you look at the pictures. I think it's an extremely wearable watch and such an interesting bit of Omega history, also a very interesting bit of Michael Schumacher history if you are into Formula One, and a nice alternative to maybe a very classic Omega Speedmaster. If you can find this with a box, I was speaking to someone on Instagram recently, very difficult to find these with complete box and papers, but if you are able to see it, those boxes are pretty cool and pretty rare. So this one just comes obviously on a black leather strap. This is from Omega as well, so quite nice. As I say throughout these videos, there will be an article written about this specific piece on lifeonthewrist.com if you want to go and read that. There will also be additional pictures if you want to see the inside case back of this watch as well as the movement. I would definitely head over to lifeonthewrist.com. It'll be the first link in the description. We'll take you to the editorial section of our website where we wrote the article about this piece. So I encourage you to go and check that out. If you are new to Life on the Wrist, be sure to subscribe to the channel and share this video with a friend who might be interested in watches. Let me know in the comment section below what you think about this piece. If you have one of these, I'd love to hear what you think, especially if you have been wearing it for a while. I think that type of feedback would help people who would be watching this video, and maybe if they're interested in getting this piece, that type of feedback would be really helpful for those individuals. Last but not least, if you wouldn't mind liking this video, it really does help the channel out, gets this video pushed to more and more individuals who might be interested in videos about watches, so that really would help the channel out greatly. With that said, guys, thank you so much for watching this video, and until next time.